Soulatluk. My name is Linica Butler. I'm the linguist for the Wiyot Tribe in Northern California. And today I want to tell you a bit about how we've addressed pandemic-related challenges in our IMLS-funded project to create a Soulatluk conversation book for the Wiyot tribal community. Soulatluk is what we consider a reawakening language with no living fluent speakers. The arrival of the white settlers in Wiyot territory in 1850 caused the rapid loss of Soulatluk, the language of the Wiyot people, through genocide, land theft, forced assimilation, and other means. Pictured here are some of the last first language speakers of Soulatluk. Della Prince on the left is the last fluent speaker that we know of, and she passed away in 1962. Nettie Rossig, Bertie James, and Jerry James, and more than a dozen other first language speakers not pictured here who worked with researchers and linguists to document the language while it was still in use, passed away years or even decades before Mrs. Prince. So Soulatluk reclamation is really based on their words that were taken down in writing and sometimes in audio. So beginning in the early 2000s, the Wiyot Tribe started reacquiring archival records of their language, and here are some written examples. There are thousands of pages of records recording the speech of over 20 fluent speakers. But as you can see from these, the records in themselves are not usable as learning materials. And so a lot of my work involves comparing these and analyzing and extracting, understanding the language that is in them, understanding how the language works by studying these materials, and from that creating the most accurate, best quality language materials for learning that I can. And there is also audio, as I mentioned. There are some place names recorded on phonograph in 1913. And there are several hours of word lists and stories, shatsik, recorded in the 1950s. So whenever possible, we use these really just valuable and precious audio recordings for language learning and reclamation as well, using things like the QR code that you see here, and you can scan this and hear the audio that I just played. Okay, so our original concept for our grant, which started in late 2019, was based on the fact that none of those records that I just showed you contain recordings of actual conversations. There are a couple of imagined conversations recited by a single speaker, but we wanted to build a conversation book for new Soulatluk learners. And the idea was partly inspired by a Yurok conversation book that is an interactive with audio and text. It's available online at this link, but we wanted this book to be sort of sourced from Wiyot tribal members and learning what they would like to learn to say in Soulatluk. And so our plan was to have bi-weekly workshops to brainstorm, get ideas, get suggestions and requests from tribal members to build conversations. We would, of course, come up with those ideas in English, and then I and my assistant would go and search the archival language materials to find the exact sentences whenever possible, or similar sentences in Soulatluk to what the tribal members were asking for. When that wasn't possible, we could reconstruct some sentences and phrases for the book based on similar content, a similar structured sentence. Maybe a tribal member wants to say, "I like to eat carrots," and we don't have that exact sentence documented in the archival materials, but there is a sentence spoken by a fluent speaker I like to eat salmon, and we know from another fluent speaker the word for carrot is gutkash, so we can reconstruct a sentence in that way. And that was the basic plan. And then as we built those conversations in Soulatluk, test them out with tribal members and get feedback and make any changes along the way. That was all well and good. We had a handful of workshops, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 workshops in late 2019, early 2020. And here are some pictures from a couple of those events and a sample little index card some of the kids filled out with ideas for sentences they'd like to see in their conversations. But of course, in early 2020, the pandemic hit, and once shutdowns were in place and we couldn't meet in person anymore, I tried initially to have Zoom meetings, but people were traumatized, people were busy with other things, and it just never picked up. So in the early months, one of the things that we did was to print out sheets like this, and the tribe was sending sack lunches and study material packets to Wiyot youth who were home trying to do school from home. And so we included these little sheets for feedback with those, gave little incentives, and asked kids to respond to previous suggestions we had, to add any related ideas they had for conversation content, or to suggest new contents or topics. Okay. For adults and kids, both in and out of the area, we started printing in the monthly tribal newsletter draft conversations that were in the works for the book, and then asking for feedback either on the ones that were in the works or again soliciting new suggestions by email. And also early in 2021, we started posting our drafts and sample content from conversations in progress on the tribe's Facebook page. As you can see here, in some cases we already had audio recordings from native speakers, and so we included those as QR codes, post the draft conversations on the Facebook page, and ask for feedback on Facebook or by email. Okay. But by far our most successful interactive feedback mechanism turned out to be Padlet. We created a Padlet account and we post draft conversations, all of them, on the Padlet page, and users, tribal members can download the draft conversations. They can make comments, they can give feedback and make new suggestions, ask questions, whatever they like. And so that has been fairly successful. It's slow. It's much slower than the in-person meetings, but it has allowed us to have a back and forth conversation. Okay. So a lot of the difficulties we faced are not especially surprising. Only a fraction of youth responding to those paper sheets we sent out. I mean, it may have felt a little bit like homework. So that's understandable. It was kind of a trickle, but we did get some responses. The newsletter, we haven't had direct responses in terms of feedback based on newsletter postings, but we still publish it to keep tribal members aware and up to date. And we have heard from tribal members who read the newsletter and are interested in signing up to train on pronunciation and record audio for the book. So that's really helpful. The Facebook posts tend to get, a lot of likes and shares, a couple dozen to a few dozen, occasional comments and questions, not a ton. The Padlet, again, has had the most back and forth interaction. And again, it's not fast, but it has allowed us to have the kind of dialogue that we wanted. So the end result is we kind of ended up doing all these things at the same time. We're still, except we haven't really done the paper forms in a while, but other than that, all of these are still ongoing, and none of the approaches alone fully replicates the interaction and idea generation of in-person workshops, but using them all more or less simultaneously has allowed us to get a lot of the input that we hoped for in a more piecemeal way, but while protecting the tribal community's health. So our progress to date is we have 29 draft conversations posted, and our original goal was 30 to 50, so we're on track for the content. It's just taking us 2 or 3 times as long. And we've had this all based on community suggestions, some back and forth interaction, and we've got a few narrators booked to help us with the audio. I have some sort of half-baked thoughts about how we might have done this better, but I'm not really sure how that would have worked out. But we would really love to hear how other tribes have handled virtual feedback and participation in their projects. I'm sorry I can't be in person to hear from you, but if anyone has had success with a strategy I haven't covered here, please feel free to email me, and I will share it with my colleagues at the tribe to see if we could implement those strategies here moving forward, because I think these will be important to incorporate so that we reach more tribal members, regardless of pandemic, tribal members who live out of the area or who may have health or transportation or family or work issues that prevent them from meeting in person. So thank you for listening. Goatswash, halula Wiyot Tribe. Keep taking good care of yourselves, and I will let Soulatluk speaker Della Prince close us out.
Jawab.